Hello everyone. Today I will be once again featuring the American Tier 10 battleship, the Montana. The enemy has sadly 5 destroyers, which of course means that this will be a fairly difficult game, because any game where the enemy has multiple destroyers means that as a battleship you rely extremely heavily on your own destroyers to be able to counter them, or alternatively radar cruisers, but we only really have one of them, and that's in New Orleans, and he's on the other side of the map. So my first reaction is of course to push up. I want to push in and I want to help my DDs, because winning this early trade, winning and taking down their DDs is so incredibly valuable for me at this point. Even worse is of course that, well, 3 DDs are on this side of the map, and one of them is a Yu Yang, which is of course the new tier 10 Pan-Asian destroyer, and that thing is a massive threat to me, because, well, those Pan-Asian deepwater torps, they give me no warning. It doesn't matter if I'm not already evading when he's firing them. By the time I see them I will die. So that's of course a huge negative. I picked the biggest, fattest target they have, which is the Grozovoi, and I managed to punish him with a 7k volley, which is of course good because the Grozovoi brings a lot of firepower to this DD exchange. So chunking him out and forcing him to retreat is very important. My next target will naturally be the Yu Yang, because once again, you don't necessarily have to focus, let's say a Shimakaze. Shimakaze is probably not that good of a first target if you have to pick a DD target like this, because your gunboats can deal with the Shimakaze. You want to focus on the targets that your gunboats will struggle with, which is enemy Kaba, enemy Grosovoi, Yu Yang, gearing, these kinds of targets. You want to focus on chunking these out so that your DDs can deal with them. And once they dealt it with them, dealing with stuff like the Shimakaze and generally the IGN DD line is not nearly as much of a challenge. So at this point, my teammates decide, my Iowa and Hindenburg decide to push into the islands. So rather than follow them into the islands on the right, which I already consider a bit of an extremely risky position, I mean there's at least 2 DDs in there, a Grosovoi and a Yu Yang, I go wide. In comparison to my teammates. The idea here is naturally to create a crossfire. If you look at the minimap, you can see that the Iowa in the islands and me in the middle islands kind of create a crossfire towards the A cap. So if the enemy tries to push in right now, they have to push in into a crossfire between me and the Iowa. So this is basic crossfire positioning, and something you always want to do when the enemy is trying to push. You force the enemy to put itself into an awkward position if they want to continue their push. Another reason, of course, for not getting any closer than this is, well, not only do they have 3 battleships to our 2 on this flank, but more importantly is the destroyers, especially the Yu Yang. I have very little warning of the torps coming my way, and I can't really rely on DD spotting them either. And at this point I don't know where the Yu Yang is. He could be flanking, he could be pushing somewhere. In fact, he could even be pushing into the cap with these battleships. It's too much of a risk to put myself closer to them. So I'm playing it safe. And at this point, if we look at the minimap, you can see that my team actually has a huge advantage on C, and they're pushing through C. So it's actually better for me to wait a bit and let my team catch up and let my team come here and help me out a bit, than trying to push in alone into what will basically be a crossfire and potential torps in my face. So we're gonna wait. And it looks like my team is doing the same thing. My Iowa has turned away, my Hindenburg is turned away, and it looks like they're gonna play safe. So this is of course good. I don't want to leave this position, because I am still, from the position I am, I'm still able to deny them A, I'm still able to harass A, and in general prevent them from getting this cap and delaying them as much as possible. So I actually enjoy the position I have. Aimed a bit too high, got a lot of bounces instead of getting that big damage I wanted. And in fact, this position has kind of forced the enemy team to turn away. It could be me, it could be a combination of me and my teammates, probably the destroyers as well. Ultimately though, we have forced them away from this position, which is fantastic. You note that I'm constantly moving my ship back and forth though. That's because we still don't know where the Yu Yang is. He's been unspotted for a long time, and those deepwater torps are such a massive threat. So I keep constantly, I shift forward, I shift backward. You never want to be a stationary or a predictable target, especially when fighting deepwater torpedo DDs, because by the time you see those torps, as I mentioned, you're pretty much dead. Another advantage of this position is of course that I'm able to support B. I'm able to help our DDs inside B because this gives me a firing angle into B. So if this Z46 keeps pushing, I might be able to help him. Sadly though, it looks like both my DDs decided to smoke up, and neither of them have hydro, whereas the enemy German DDs of course does have hydro. So they are put themselves at a huge disadvantage. In fact, our gearing looks like he's already being shot at. He is in fact being shot at. He's sitting in the smoke against the hydroing German DD, who's pushing into them. So he's basically playing in the Z46's pocket right now. And the worst thing is, by not scouting, I cannot help him because I have no vision of this Z46 that's tearing him apart. And the Z46 ends up killing both my DDs. Both of them sat in smokes against the hydroing DD. So this of course means, well, B is going to be lost, and now I have another issue to deal with. The Z46 might be pushing that flank and pushing towards me. The Yu Young is in the cap as well. Another problem. We need to focus him. I call target on him. We need to help our Z23, because if our Z23 dies at this point, our spotting on the Yu Young disappears and we have no more warning of him. He does in fact go down. Try to see what kind of maneuver he makes. It looks like, is he slowing down? Maybe a bit. I only have one shot. I know I only have one shot before it disappears, so I tried to make it count, but sadly a combination of not perfect aim and dispersion means I only get one single overpen. And now we are in some serious trouble, because we've lost all spotting on the Yu Yang, and I can no longer contest the cap. I hit the Citadel by giving too much broadside to the Missouri, but honestly it was kind of worth it for me simply because I wanted to try punish the Yu Yang. Sadly, because I didn't do any damage to him, it wasn't ultimately worth it, and I ended up trading a lot of health for very little damage. Another thing worth noting is the Grosse Kurfürst has showed up on this flank. So on this flank they now have a Missouri, a Lion, a North Carolina, a Grosse Kurfürst, a Ibuki, and a Yu Yang pushing this flank. And my Iowa buddy has already pretty much bailed all the way far back behind me, and at this point this cap is absolutely lost. Of course, there's also the risk of this Z46 pushing in and flanking us, because, well, he killed two DDs there. We only have one Kaba left. All our spotting DDs have died. So this game has quickly devolved and become extremely hard. I tried to land a volley on the Yu Yang, but he jukes me. I thought he was going to turn left. It turns out he's turning right instead, and this juke throws off my aim enough. I tried to slow down. Once again, I risk being shot by the battleships, but I want to get rid of this Yu Yang. This Yu Yang is the one single thing that's he's kind of pushing me out of the battle. The threat of these torpedoes alone is what's pushing me out of the battle, and that is such a huge issue for me now, because if I can't get rid of this guy, I'm gonna have such issues getting into the battle itself. Our Kaba dies, and all 5 of our destroyers are dead. So there's gonna be no more chances of one of them spotting the DDs. So at this point I realize I have to do something drastic, and that means I'm gonna try to ambush the destroyers. Usually when they're behind islands like this, destroyers expect you to sail away. They expect you to sail to safety and to disengage. So I play into this expectation, and I counter it. I turn hard in, I turn sharply in, and the idea here is that the Yu Yang is going to push around this island, expecting me to be turning away and fleeing, and instead he's going to be running face first into me, and hopefully I will be able to kill him and dodge the torpedoes. Very risky maneuver, and not something I would necessarily recommend unless you're forced to do it. And in this case I was forced to do it, but my gamble does pay off, and I do surprise him exactly as I predicted. I turn hard into the right, of course, because I expect him to have launched at least one volley of torps before he went down. You always expect torps. Always expect them, and you won't be disappointed. My Hindenburg manages to kill the Z46, and my prediction of the torps is correct, and I dodge them all. You see how little warning you get for these deep water torps? You have 0 warning, so getting rid of him was extremely important now. I ping my Iowa because he's kind of disengaged far too far, especially considering it's Cyclone. As far back as he sits, he's not going to have any impact on the game for a very long time, and he's even going around the island, so yeah, he's going to be out of commission for a long time. However, I need to push into B now. My team at C, for some reason, has been taking extremely long. Even though they have been outnumbering the enemy significantly, they've still been losing, and they're taking extremely long to get anything done. Ideally, I wouldn't want to be sailing the way I am, but I have to protect my Hindenburg. My Hindenburg is pushing aggressively, and you kind of want the team play here. I run into problems though. A lion right in front of me. A lion alone wouldn't be much of an issue. A lion I can take on easily, but the problem is the Missouri. However, Lion and Conqueror both have one significant weakness when it comes especially to brawling. Yes, they have underwater citadel, yes, they have great brawling capacity, but the turret face of both the Lion and the Conqueror is flat. It's flat and it's not particularly thick. The armor isn't particularly thick either. The Missouri pops up, he's the lower HP target and he's giving broadside. So I try to punish him with some citadels. Unfortunately, I get none. I do, however, chunk him for maybe 26k, 25k damage, and he is panicking and fleeing. I slow down because I want him to move out of range. If he moves out of 8 kilometers, he can no longer shoot me because of the Cyclone. So I slow down and I happily let him move out of the way. Also, slowing down allows the Hindenburg to close the distance and help me with this guy. I focus his turrets, of course, because as I mentioned earlier, turret faces are a weakness. The frontal turrets on both the Conqueror and the Lion are a weakness. That is the second time I've damaged the front turrets on this Lion, so this of course affects his damage significantly. I'm taking out 50% of his damage every time I break those turrets, and whenever he's angled towards me, I will be focusing on those turrets because that's a weakness I do want to punish. Getting a lot of broadside as he's forced to dodge torps, so I aim at his nose from the side, and you can see I'm able to penetrate it from this angle quite easily. However, he pops Royal Navy heel, so at this point we are in some serious trouble. The Grosse Kurfürst is pushing in. I'm forced to give broadside to the Lion simply because I have to disengage from the Grosse Kurfürst. If I try to angle against the Lion, I will give broadside to the Grosse Kurfürst, so my only option is turning away. Once again, turrets are the weakness, that's what I aim for, and I managed to completely destroy the front turret. 10k damage, but more importantly, that's a 50% of his damage gone completely, and that he will not be able to recover it. I keep angling away though, because Grosse Kurfürst, while he has a lot of gunpowder, if I'm angled, he should not be able to deal too much damage. Also, the firing angles of the Montana is one of the major advantages it has over many of the other battleships, especially in brawling range. Once again, we focus the turrets and the superstructure. Not hitting the turrets or breaking them, but I am getting a lot of pens on the superstructure instead. I show a fairly large amount of broadside at this point, and that's simply because I know he's down gun. I know he's dying, I know he cannot deal that much damage to me in return, and I try to get my secondaries to finish him off. He has switched HE, but it doesn't matter at this point, he does die regardless. There's a Missouri in front of me. I want to deal with him first because I'm angled away from the NC and the Grosse Kurfürst. However, if I keep sailing away, angling from them like this, I might give broadside to the Missouri, so I need to make sure this guy is absolutely guaranteed dead. My New Orleans dies, and we're down to 3 versus 4 at this point. But the Missouri dies as well. My Gneisenau now finishes him off with what little health he had, and suddenly we're down to 3 versus 3. The problem is, of course, I have no health left. I have absolutely no health. But I am maintaining my angling. I'm making sure that I do not give any sort of unnecessary broadside, and in fact I'm gonna see if I can maybe punish this Ibuki. Getting rid of this Ibuki now would be extremely good. And volley is in the air, he's turning out kinda as I predicted. I'm hoping he dies, and I get a penetration that deals no damage. So RNG decided to let that Ibuki live, which is of course unfortunate, especially considering you normally overmatch Ibuki armor because he's got such little armor, so my dispersion must have pretty much landed perfectly around him. The Cyclone is letting up by the looks of it, so the brawl is now in full power and we can spot everything from, well, we have normal spotting. The Cyclone is gone. The Grosse Kurfürst is a potential target here because of how much broadside he's giving me, but ultimately if I maintain the angle I am right now, I'm actually able to keep my armor angled against the Grosse Kurfürst while being able to punish the North Carolina. Both ships eat a lot of damage if they give me broadside, but the potential to first of all get rid of the weaker target that is easier to kill and who has a very hittable citadel makes the North Carolina a priority target. So a second volley chunks him out. You note of course that my reload is extremely fast at this point, and that is because I run Adrenaline Rush, a perk I highly recommend on pretty much every ship, and a perk I probably consider pretty overpowered because it's something you almost run on every single ship regardless. Trying to finish off. I really want this guy killed so I can start shooting at the Grosse Kurfürst and punishing him for the fact that he's giving me so much broadside. The fact that I managed to survive that brawl is very important because right now we're creating a crossfire. I'm hoping my Iowa will understand to keep angled. The longer this my Iowa lives, the longer we have this crossfire angle, and that is so very important. So if the Iowa just maintains his angle and keeps sailing away, we have a very good chance of still recovering from this game, even though there's only 3 minutes left and we are down, without a doubt. We are significantly down. My second volley does not finish the NC off. I'm hoping my Iowa would be shooting him, but it seems like no one else is actually focus firing this guy, which is a bit of a shame, because kill him off and we remove a lot of their firepower, and of course we gain a lot of points. My Gneisenau shoots, but honestly I don't really have much faith in Gneisenau accuracy at this range, and it turns it was a good thing I didn't have much faith, because his volley completely missed. Our Iowa dies, but I managed to trade it back by killing the NC at this point. Now, I need a cap. I need to secure the cap, which means I need to avoid being shot at, because my Gneisenau didn't push into the cap with me to speed up the capturing. I think he doesn't understand how little point we have left. I could be undetected, but the Kurfürst is turning in. And what's very important is when a German battleship turns in or out relative to you and he gives you broadside, he actually angles his turtle back. And when he turns, his entire ship shifts. Basically the weight of the ship shifts when you turn, and that means the turtleback angles that would normally cause your shells to bounce can be penetrated, and that's why you see citadels like that. He's still giving a fair amount of broadside. I aim pretty high. I aim for his superstructure because, well, he's pushing straight towards me, and I take the risk that if he does try to shoot me, I might be able to dodge the volley and secure the cap anyway. It's a big risk, but at this point we have to take risks, because we have 2 minutes left and the enemy has a 200-point lead. More than a 200-point lead. So I hit the brakes and I turn in, and I actually managed to completely dodge his shells. And this is a pretty huge play at this point, because it allows me to secure the B cap for my team. So here, of course, comes one of the huge advantages of Kurfürst versus Montana brawling. My firing angles are far superior. I'm able to angle to the point that I'm able to bounce his shells consistently, whereas the large superstructure of the Kurfürst makes him an extremely juicy target for these guns. And you can see the amount of damage I've been dealing to him all the time. I shoot and turn in, and his volleys, he's trying to pen my armor, whereas I, in return, am penning his superstructure. So this Kurfürst that was almost full HP, had 60-70k, has been pretty much crushed by me. He has 4000 health. I'm expecting my Gneisenau to torp him, and my Gneisenau rams. My 20k HP plus Gneisenau, that wasn't even being shot at, decided to ram the 4k health Grosse Kurfürst. So at this point I'm contemplating the meaning of life and how long it would take me to uninstall this game, since any chance we had at a victory was just thrown out the window completely by this Gneisenau's exceptional decision making, where he decided that an already dead target was a good target to sacrifice his life on. At this point, my only chance is this Ibuki opening fire at me. He's somewhere here behind the islands. Sadly, the Ibuki is not as special as our Gneisenau, and decides to hold his fire and just hides behind the islands, and there is absolutely nothing I can do at this point, because, well, I was forced to angle and fight the Grosse Kurfürst, which means the Ibuki has plenty of time to disengage. And I tried to pop a spotter plane, maybe get some sort of information, but with the time ticking down, 10 seconds left, it's fairly obvious that this game will in fact lead to a loss, and there is absolutely nothing we can do to prevent it. Game ends, sadly. Well, game ends now, and it's a defeat. 269,000 damage, Confederate, high caliber, close quarters experts, fireproof, and a dreadnought. Of course, I did quite a lot of tanking this game, but ultimately still a defeat. In fact, if we look at the team score, we can see that I almost hit 2000 base XP, which is almost the same what the enemy did, but it was still a defeat. My destroyers, sadly, as you can see, my gearing died very early. Yugoma Ognevoy both went down very early. This Z46 kind of won them the game by killing both of them in B. Something that should, of course, never happen, because you shouldn't sit in smokes against German DDs, but that's the kind of thing that does happen. And ultimately, of course, the Gneisenau's ram was debatable towards the end. Looking at detailed report, 2.4 million potential damage, so not really that much tanking, but considering the situation, the survival was quite important, and the angling and how to deal with both the lion and conqueror in brawling is quite an important lesson to note. The turrets are the weakness, and that's what you should be aiming for. Secondary, almost no damage. Fire, almost no damage. I mean, 12k combined, 11k combined. Your AP is your bread and butter. I took a fair amount of fire damage, but that's mostly because I didn't bother repairing it since it's healable damage. Overall, though, this game showed, well, it showed just how much of a threat Pan-Asian DDs are. It showed you ways that you can surprise them, even if they are extremely risky and something I only recommend under dire circumstances. But it also showed you the advantages the Montana still has in brawling against the likes of Conqueror and Lion. Both have terrible firing angles, both have squishy turrets, and even the Grosse Kurfürst, with its turtle back, has a huge superstructure that you can pen and punish, and the Grosse Kurfürst also has extremely bad firing angles on the back turrets, which means if the Grosse Kurfürst wants to match you turret for turret, he has to give significantly more broadside than you ever have to. Anyway, that was, well, I'll probably feature some more Montana commentaries since people have been requesting it a lot, but let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. As usual, I will start off with the modules. Not really much to talk about here. Consumable wise, this is a tier 10, so you should be running premium damage control and premium heal, because the health and money you lose out on by not running these premium consumables will probably be more expensive than the investment of actually getting these consumables. So kind of like running a premium. You're already investing so much money into every single game that you might as well be running premium consumables as well. Spotter plane, not as important, but premium spotter plane can be extremely useful. In fact, I will probably feature another Montana commentary where I will show you guys just how incredibly useful this spotter plane is. Upgrade wise, turret survival, followed by additional tankiness, followed by AA range. Simply because you can't slot better dispersion. If you could slot better dispersion, I might use it, but honestly the AA range fits extremely well with the rest of the Montana build, since it does give you that 6.2 km range on the long range guns. Better rudder shift, followed by concealment, followed by a better dispersion. Rudder shift is debatable. With all the Royal Navy spam, you might as well also use damage control, but considering my positioning is usually good enough to get away with not having to deal too much with being burned to death, I tend to prefer running the rudder shift. Both are extremely good. Don't get me wrong, both are extremely good. But keep in mind, if you don't run this reduced rudder shift, your rudder shift will be about 22 seconds, which means even if you see torpedoes coming, you might not always be able to dodge them. So getting damage control increases your tankiness against HE, but in return reduces it significantly when it comes to dealing with torpedoes. So keep that in mind when you make the change. Concealment expert, mostly because you can get a very good concealment of 13.4. And finally, improved dispersion. This is my opinion one of the best 3 million upgrades in the entire game, because that's what gives the Montana its deadly accuracy. Captain perks wise, priority target. Especially with your turret survival, you don't really lose turrets too much, and priority target is extremely useful once again against destroyers. You want to get both adrenaline rush and, I would say, turret traverse. Turret traverse is not as important on the Montana as it is, for example, on the Yamato, because the Montana has a fairly good turret traverse to begin with, but every little bit helps. You want Superintendent for that additional heal, you want Concealment Expert, and you want Fire Prevention, because especially if you're running the rudder shift like I am, not having fire prevention is quite nasty. And finally, Vigilance. Not that useful against deep water torps. I mean, it helps, but considering you already have such a bad rudder shift, it's quite a small increase. But against all the other torpedoes, it is of course useful, and it will mitigate the damage you take. It is by far the best use of the 3 points you can, in my opinion at least. I mean, you could go basics of survivability as well, but I prefer, once again, fires are not really an issue for me in the Montana. It's the huge chunk damage that is more of an issue. If someone wants to really burn me to death by spamming HE, especially when I run fire prevention, it's going to take them so long and so much concentrated focus that my positioning has to be fairly bad for him to get away with it. So honestly, I identify other problems there than me being burned to death as the problem. Anyway, flag-wise, healing and fireproof. I mean the fireproof flag, the fire reduction flag. Faster reload time. I'm running actually secondaries. I think it's probably, especially with the recent midway buffs, it's probably better to run the AA. 50% XP, rather run Captain XP. Might as well save those guys in case some new line pops up. You can run, of course, speed, and you can run the detonation and secondary and so forth, but I usually don't bother too much with these things. Anyway, that was my Montana commentary, or my Montana build as well. I will probably return with another Montana commentary where I show off especially how important the spotter plane is, especially when you run this improved dispersion build, because they synchronize extremely well when it comes to smoke firing. Anyway, that was all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it.